could read your thoughts. From the future.
The movies of 1985.
Hello, and welcome to week 20 of the year 1985, Tuesday the 14th of May to Monday the 20th of May. My name is Jason Hutchins, and I'm stuck here in the year 1985, and what I do to while away the hours is I spin a bingo machine, select a random number, and use that to choose a movie to watch. I go and rent a VHS videotape from a nearby video store. So without further ado, let me start rolling that bingo machine now and see what this week's number is. Mix it up well. A little bit too well. A ball is out. And it's number 46 this week. So let me look that up on my spreadsheet. Number 46 is a movie called Ran. R-A-N. Now that's another Japanese movie. We had Angel's Egg last week. Ran is a co-production between Japan and France by the look of it, running in at 160 minutes. So what's that? 2 hours 40. So it's a long one. Now, I don't know anything about it apart from that. I've never seen it before, but I suspect that Video City over in Claremont might have it. So I'll go catch a bus to Claremont now to grab the video. And meanwhile, let me switch on the TV and you can listen to ads while I'm gone.
If you're in the sun, summer, don't sizzle like a silly sausage. Slip on a shirt, swap on sunscreen and slap on a hat.
What's his number?
That's the sun protection factor. The higher the number, the safer you are. Slip, slop, slap. Slip on a shirt, slap on sunscreen and
Sure, it's got a high number though.
slap on a hat. Slip, slop,
Okay, I'm back. Let me pop this in and pause. So I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it didn't occur to me straight away that Ran is a classic Akira Kurosawa movie. The director, of course, of Rashomon and The Seven Samurai and Yojimbo back in the 50s and 60s. This is one of his final movies, released in 1985. So let's just look at the cover of the video cassette. So on the front, we've got a couple of feudal Japanese warriors on horseback, a film by Akira Kurosawa, it says, and Ran in big letters, and then the Japanese characters for that. Turning over to the back, there's a few photographs, one of a woman with a samurai sword and a couple more of the warriors, and a little blurb saying, a sparkling masterpiece from Akira Kurosawa, voted the best film of 1985 by the National Society of Film Critics. And the description says, Japan's foremost director has created a masterpiece with his own King Lear. That's right, it's an adaptation of a Shakespeare play that brilliantly mixes Japanese history, Shakespeare's plot, and Kurosawa's own feelings about loyalty. Set in 16th century Japan, an aging ruler, Lord Hidetora, attempts to peacefully divide his hard-won kingdom among his three sons. Instead, they turn against each other and betray their father. Then, ruthless ambition, evil plot, woven by scheming advisors, and Hidetora's own past savagery combine to spawn a whirlwind of chaos. It ultimately drives the old man insane, shatters his kingdom, plot spoiler, and destroys his family. With Kurosawa's relentless demand for perfection evident in every scene, Ran won an Oscar for costume design and was voted Best Film of 1985. As you heard previously, it is also Kurosawa's personal favourite of his movies and a fitting culmination to a remarkable career, highlighted by triumph after triumph. So I really should have known about this movie, but I've never seen it before. I've only seen the old ones, the old black and white ones, like Rashomon. I'm looking forward to seeing this. If you're in Australia, it's available on SBS On Demand for free, or you can rent it on YouTube. And without further ado, let me press play on tape and watch all 2 hours and 40 minutes of Ran.
Unavailable for years, now back on video. From the director of The Seven Samurai and Rashomon, Fox Lorber Home Video presents Akira Kurosawa's Academy Award-winning epic, Ran. In an age when warlords rule, a family dynasty is torn apart by betrayal and the relentless quest for power. '85 Academy Award winner, Best Costume Design, Best Film of the Year, Best Foreign Film. 4 stars, a great glorious achievement, visually stunning. Nominated for 5 Academy Awards, a masterpiece for generations to come. Ran.
Well, okay, so it's pronounced Run. I got it wrong. I was saying Ran in my very Aussie accents, but that was a really good movie. Enjoyed that. Every Frame is a Painting. That's the name of a YouTube channel that I subscribe to that analyzes movies, or especially the visual aspect of movies, but it is pretty true in this one. I'll go through that soon when I talk about the first 15 minutes, but it is a bit reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon in that sense, where every shot of the movie is just gorgeous. Part of the reason for that, I think, is Kurosawa storyboarded the movie by painting each scene, like in full colour. So, like I said earlier, a lot of his films previously were in black and white because they were in the 50s and 60s, but this just makes a vibrant use of colour. In fact, the 3 sons, the 3 brothers in this movie are all colour-coded. One wears yellow, one wears red, and one wears blue, like a light blue. And that really helps, like the visual language of the movie. You sort of always know who is who, and you know, the soldiers that run with them are similarly colour-coded. And talking about colour-coded, one thing that didn't quite ring true with this movie is the blood. The blood is so bright red, and I know that was in our bingo sheet when we used to do that with the 1985 movies. It is really just this incredibly fake bright red blood, and it does that Japanese squirty thing in a few scenes as well. You know what I'm talking about. In a similar way, the main warlord character, whose name I think is Hidetora, he just has this completely ridiculous, unrealistic old man makeup. Like, the actor portraying him must be in mid-30s or something like that. And he's meant to be a doddering old man. He's got like these long grey eyebrows and long moustache. It's very clearly fake, but I think that's quite deliberate because it's a bit like the kabuki theatre, you know, the Japanese, where everything's very exaggerated. All of the facial expressions especially are very exaggerated. It almost seems like overacting sometimes. And, you know, that did put me off a bit. For that reason, I'm only, you know, that took me out of the movie a little bit. I think I'm going to give this 4.5 stars and not 5 stars, which would have otherwise been my choice. Still a Mintox though, you should definitely see it. It's on SBS, like I said, if you're in Australia. But what Kurosawa does is he doesn't film too many close-ups. So you don't really notice this over-the-top makeup too much. A lot of the shots are long shots with a telephoto lens, and it's a little bit like watching the theatre on an outdoor stage because, you know, most of it is shot on location. You feel like you need binoculars sometimes to see exactly what's going on. There's a lot of great horse riding, a lot of falling off horses. My goodness, the stunt people in this movie, there must have been 100 people who fell off a horse in some way or other. A couple of them got a bit trampled by the horses as well. But let me go through the first 15 minutes just to give you the setup. So we fade into a long shot of 4 archers on horseback on a beautiful grassy hill overlooking some other hills, and some tense music anticipates that something bad is about to happen. And overlaid on top of this beautiful scenery is the credits. So like a lot of the American 1985 movies, this movie starts with about 1.5 minutes of credits, but it's over all of this beautiful scenery, and we see these horsemen in different arrangements in different places. And you sort of ask yourself, are they waiting for battle? Are they watching for something? They're also beautifully costumed and sort of in period dress for 16th century Japan. But after 1.5 minutes, we see a wild boar moving through the grass. And so you realize it's a hunting expedition. And I was immediately reminded of Princess Mononoke, which we watched last year as part of the movies of 1999, because that, of course, starts with a mutated wild boar attacking a village and a horseman shooting arrows into it. So it's quite reminiscent of that. So the chase is on, but we cut straight to the titles, red text on a black background, run. And that means chaos. So we then cut to the men at camp, drinking and celebrating after a successful hunt, telling stories, having some laughs, and an old man holds court. And he's the warlord that the movie centers around. That's Hidetora. So he holds court, and his 3 sons are by his side, and his older son asks, "Father, are we going to roast the boar?" But he tells him, "Look, it's too old and tough." And, that's a fairly clear metaphor. And one of the visiting warlords, so there's also 2 visiting warlords from nearby kingdoms, I guess, they sort of joke that he would stick in their throat. So these 2 warlords are trying to curry favour with our hero or our protagonist by marrying their daughters to his unmarried son. So it's kind of a time of peace and unity, although you're not too sure if these 2 warlords have the best intentions in mind. Anyway, they're all sitting around getting pleasantly drunk. So the oldest son asks their jester, because of course they have a jester. Now, in Japan you wouldn't have had a jester, but it turns out that this movie is based on a William Shakespeare play, King Lear, where a jester plays a major role. So, of course, there's a jester, and he jumps around singing a song about a hare hopping to visit them from the distant mountains to show off his lovely ears or something like that. Now, the younger son, Saburo, immediately recognizes the metaphor here and says, "Don't you mean 2 hares hopping here to be eaten by our father?" Of course, he's talking about the 2 visiting warlords. His older brothers scold him for his rudeness, and his father actually just now falls asleep at this point, and that it's not clear whether he's fallen asleep because he's had too much sake, or maybe he's tired from the hunt, or maybe he's just a doddering old man and he needs an afternoon nap. But his older son thinks he's doing it to save face because there's no good response to his youngest son's impertinence. So they let the father be. They leave him in the sun to sleep. But Saburo, the younger son, he goes and cuts some branches from a nearby bush to build a little shelter to shelter his father from the bright afternoon sun. So a little bit later on, the father awakes from a dream. So this is classic Shakespeare, isn't it? Where he was wandering around in a strange wilderness, shouting out, but nobody was there to answer his call. But then eventually he heard the voices of his 3 beloved sons, and he's called back. So that caused him to reach a decision, and he sort of calls a little meeting in which he cedes total authority of his kingdom to his eldest son, Taro, gifting his other sons, Jiro and Saburo, a castle each, ordering them to support their older brother and telling them that he plans to spend his twilight years visiting them in turn. And he does the trick from the Straight Story, which we watched in the movies of 1999 last year, that David Lynch movie about the guy that drove his lawnmower across the United States to visit his brother. He does this trick where he gives each of his sons a single arrow and asks them to break it, which they do easily, but then he gives them a bundle of 3 arrows and asks them to break that, and none of them can. And that, of course, is saying that, united together, you're going to be strong and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's the first 15 minutes of the movie. That sets everything up. Now, it's a 2 hours, 40-minute movie, and it does follow the plot of King Lear. Of course, King Lear is more about a king doing something similar with his 3 daughters. But anyway, what happens in this movie run, of course, is that things go pear-shaped. The 2 older sons lust for power, and there's a lot of treachery and civil war and brother against brother. And Hidetora is sort of stripped of his authority, and he descends into madness and wanders the wilderness with his jester, kind of like The Dream. And the film culminates, of course, in your typical Shakespearean tragic finale. So there you go. Now, a lot of people believe this film is a cinematic masterpiece when you look at YouTube comments and all of that sort of thing. So it is definitely worth watching. Kurosawa himself was 76 when he made this movie. His eyesight was almost gone, and he needed people to set up the shots for him and things like that because he couldn't see so well, but he had storyboarded the whole thing with paintings. His wife tragically passed away during the film's production. He took a single day to mourn her passing before resuming work. Gives a meaning to the word workaholic, doesn't it? So there you go. Akira Kurosawa's movie Run, definitely worth seeing. Watch it on SBS if you can. I really enjoyed it. 4.5 stars from me. It's a Mintox. But now,
I'm driving along and I'm just singing my song. I'm in a news-free zone.
well, welcome to the News Free Zone, everybody. That time of the podcast where we look back at the news from 40 years ago, from this week in 1985, so we don't have to worry about the news from the year 2025. Now, this week in 1985, 3 scientists from England, they announced in Nature that they had detected an alarming hole in the Earth's ozone layer over Antarctica. So that led directly to that slip, slop, slap advert that you heard earlier on. But more importantly, it galvanised global action, and within 2 years it led to the Montreal Protocol to phase out ozone-depleting chemicals. Also, NASA and the Pentagon revealed that the space shuttle was going to carry an orbiting experiment for Reagan's Star Wars SDI program, using space lasers to shoot down missiles. Also, in Melbourne, Australia, this week in 1985, Beam Software, known at the time as Melbourne House, released The Way of the Exploding Fist on home computers, such as the Commodore 64. It's a great fighting game that I remember from back in my youth. And in mid-May 1985, this week in fact, the finale of the TV soap opera Dallas left 300 million viewers gasping in disbelief as Bobby Irwin, played by Patrick Duffy, of course, was killed off in a dramatic hit and run, and audiences would gasp a second time when the following year he resurfaced, just having a shower. Oh, I'm back. I'm in the shower. Kind of a crazy twist. At the Cannes Film Festival this week, actually in 1985, A dramedy from Yugoslavia won top prize. It was called Father Was Away on Business. Now, it won the Palme d'Or. I'd never heard of that, but it put the director Costa Rica on the world cinema map. So that's something I'm going to write down. I like discovering things as part of doing this look back on what was happening in the world 40 years ago. Also in Australia, the Queensland Police raided a fertility clinic in Brisbane, seizing the files of 20,000 women, which was part of an investigation into IVF practices, which is really weird, isn't it, to think that they were investigating that. But it was a huge overreach in terms of the police violating medical privacy, and their search warrant was actually overturned by the court. So it ended up turning into a massive debate, which I don't remember happening down here in Australia. But over in the US, US authorities arrested Navy veteran John A. Walker Jr., who was part of one of the biggest spy rings in US history. He'd been selling NATO codes to the Soviets for 18 years. He was aided by his son, his brother, and a friend, and his estranged wife tipped off the FBI, leading to that bust. But the media in 1985 called 1985 the year of the spy, since there was just so many espionage arrests. We saw that, of course, with the Falcon and the Snowman earlier this year, but in case you're waiting for another spy movie, just let it be known that I am not doing Spies Like Us, even though it was released in 1985, because it's not a very good movie. I don't want to watch it. Anyway, I think last week I was talking about the Dire Straits releasing Brothers in Arms, one of the biggest albums of all time. It was released last week in the US in 1985, but this week in the UK. And I'm very ashamed, but it took me ages. I wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realised that Mark Knopfler is not American. He's actually a Glaswegian. I never knew that Sting sung on Money for Nothing. That's, I've been down a rabbit hole, haven't I? Or I've been sticking my head in the sand some way or other. But just because they sound so American, that steel guitar and his lyrical twangs and stuff. But I listened to this album in the car during the week, and it's not that great. And Money for Nothing, it's like 8 minutes long, and the lyrics are like, they'd be cancel-worthy these days. They're quite intolerant, really, aren't they? It's shocking. But the album did sell over 1 million copies in CD format, the first album in history to do so. But now, over on Usenet, Usenet is 1985's version of social media. If you go to olduse.net in your web browser, you too can read social media from 40 years ago. On net.micro, there's a long thread discussing the Atari ST because that was shown at the Toronto Computer Fair this week or last week. And it's apparently going to be available to buy in Canada before the US, which is pretty exciting to everyone there. The price list shows that it's about a third of the price of an equivalent Apple Macintosh. That is the same CPU, the same amount of memory, and also a monochrome monitor. So you literally could have bought 3 Atari STs for one Macintosh, which is why they were calling it the Jackintosh. Jack Tramiel, of course, was head of Atari at the time. He'd gone there after running Commodore into the ground, some might say. Anyway, basically there was a quote from him where critics were maintaining that there is no home computer market. And he said, well, it's undeniable that personal computers are going into the home even if there is no market at the moment. Now, over on net.misc, a user called Ben Cranston was complaining about new Coke. Now, you remember a few weeks back that Coke has launched their new taste. And he asked, has anyone compared the list of ingredients on the old can and the new can? Because he did, And guess what? The new cans don't contain sugar. They have something called high fructose corn syrup. Now, what the hell is that? Now, these days, of course, we know that everything in America is sweetened with this corn byproduct, which isn't too healthy, apparently. But anyway, that was quite interesting to read that someone was just discovering that. But he said that maybe there's a correlation between the change in formula and the sanctions that we are putting on Nicaragua, because sugar is their second biggest export after coffee, and also the fact that the Contra's political leader is the former manager of the Coca-Cola plant over there. Anyway, conspiracy theories abound. And finally, on net.sf lovers, that's SF for science fiction, Gary Travis was asking about a movie called Between Time and Timbuktu that he remembered seeing on PBS many years ago, and which was apparently written by Kurt Vonnegut. He said that he would love to watch it just one more time if somebody can track it down. So this is the kind of thing that I love. I just go and Google that straight away. I chuck it into YouTube. Of course, the whole movie is there on YouTube for the watching. You can just start streaming it immediately. It's from 1972, and it does, in fact, blend various works of Kurt Vonnegut into a single narrative, following Stoney Stevenson, an amateur poet who wins a competition and is selected to be the first human to test a teleportation device. And he's sent on an unpredictable journey whereby he encounters a surreal mix of characters from Vonnegut's novels, including Cat's Cradle, Slaughterhouse-Five, and The Sirens of Titan. Now, I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan. I'd never heard of this movie. I've started watching it on YouTube, and guess what? I'm going to go and watch it now. So until next week, don't forget to rewind.